Hi, everybody. I'm here with Liz Corridore, a former colleague at Holmesglen Institute of Tafe in Victoria. Liz is in tropical Coffs Harbour. Now, I'm not sure if that background is actually Coffs Harbour, but we can always pretend that it is. Liz, welcome, and thank you for joining me for my Joyful Teachers series.
Thank you so much for having me, Jo. I feel honoured to be part of your project and hopefully can instill a little bit of positivity to any teachers that are considering their happiness in their careers.
Oh, thank you so much. So Liz, you've worn a few hats and you have a master's in learning and development in early childhood. And because that's not enough, it's also in adult learning as well. Your current role is as a casual relief teacher and working with teachers in educational support, and you're teaching teachers all about early intervention, which sounds incredibly rewarding.
It is extremely rewarding because I guess one way that I see it is that we're catching the students who perhaps are needing that little bit of extra one-on-one support, nurturing, somebody around them who wants to listen to them, who is happy just to sit with them and not leave, even when things get tough, to say, well, I'm going to stay. So I think it's really important that these particular children get that message that there's a minimum of one person who's prepared to stay put regardless of what their behaviour or whatever it is that's going on for them is doing.
It must keep you pretty busy wearing those hats. I think as long as I've known you, always more than one hat. But how many days a week are you relieving, and or what's the ratio to direct teaching with students and then adult learners?
It varies a little bit because with the TAFE teaching, it depends when classes are scheduled. So that could be 3 days straight in TAFE, and then the other 2 days would be in primary schools. Or some days, some weeks, if TAFE is less, then I might do up to 5 days in primary schools. So it varies every single week. Often it's a 6:30 in the morning call to go to a primary school. So my life is fun. Nothing predictable about it.
Certainly interesting.
It's very interesting. And I've just always been that way, to the frustration of my family at times. It's like, why can't you just do one thing? But I can't.
No fun in that. So with COVID, obviously I'm in Victoria and you're in New South Wales. We've had differences in restrictions. Have you experienced much with lockdown over the past few months?
Been really, really fortunate here, and particularly being in regional New South Wales. So they had the original lockdown earlier in the year, and then we stayed virtual. So we taught all our TAFE classes virtually for months, and then in term 4 we've come back on as normal. Schools have been back on for a couple of terms. It's great. We don't have any cases, haven't had since April in this whole region. So people are relatively relaxed but wary about it, but there's certainly, it's going to be fine. Yes. I think, this is a big challenge for us as human beings to have this bug around that we don't know what to do with, but we'll work it out. And children generally have been pretty good about, well, they're great for washing their hands now. We've got no colds, no other kinds of diseases happening, which has been a benefit, really. And they've learnt a lot of adaptation skills as well. They've had to do a lot of relearning, almost interacting socially when they come back into school. So after the lockdown they had to, and then again when they went out and came back, they had to meet their friends again who they hadn't been allowed to see. And little kinders were struggling with that a bit, and even to be in a classroom where you just couldn't get up and go to the fridge whenever you wanted to, like you could at home learning, it's quite funny. And originally the children would just walk out of the room. Where are you off to? But they're just used to being in their homes, but they've done really, really well. I think we're, like I say, because we're regional, we're super lucky. Sydney is probably a little bit more constricted at the moment, but they've had more cases. But I think generally speaking, we're one of the lucky states at the moment. The economy's been going along quite well for most of it, except for that original lockdown. So,
So you mentioned that your family said, Liz, can't you just stick to one thing? I wonder what actually brought you to teaching. Is there a particular moment you remember you wanted? Well, I know it's more than a teacher, but a career in education. When did it start crossing your mind that'd be something you'd be interested in?
I'm a little concerned, Jo. I actually had a sort of a dream when I was very young. And I saw myself, and I was so young that I can't even say whether it was a dream or just having a strong thought about it or something, surrounded by children. I then went on to be very fortunate to have wonderful parents who were very, very engaged in all of our learning. And that was a great example. Had some fabulous teachers in primary and high school who I still think back to. And even though it was a long time ago, their particular techniques and strategies meant that learning was fun and engaging. And it just made such an impact. I've just always wanted to be something that involved teaching. And maybe that's why I do several different types of teaching. So long as I'm in education, I'm happy. So...
I love that, and I've so enjoyed interviewing different teachers, and it is pretty understandable that most people say, well, it's the example someone set for them, and and generally it seems that it's a general knowing. Because not everyone really is, there are plenty of people that say, oh, kids, no way. And then there's other people who are like, yeah, I love it. And, sometimes I think, oh, adults. Sometimes. Yeah. Lovely. So obviously there's a lot of variety, and, you've had lots of different experiences. Can you remember any particular challenges that you've had and how you've overcome them over the years? Is there anything that sticks out?
I sort of found this an interesting thing to think about, because challenges, to me, I guess, are actually where the positives happen. Because if you don't have a challenge to overcome, or something new to learn or excite or make you feel enthusiastic about, then yes, you're going to see that as a challenge, and that's a negative. But if you think, okay, this is a challenge, what am I going to do? Let's put some things into place so that that challenge, then it actually changes its name to an experience rather than a challenge. So I think it's all about that sort of reframing. And life is full of challenges.
Yeah.
But how we approach them, on the whole, some days not going to be great. But on the whole, I think if you can think of them, so as I tried to sort of think about things that might have been challenging, I struggled to find them. Like I came up with things like, I'm usually quite an introverted person, and I've changed my career path a few times, which has meant that I've had to go into new environments quite a lot, meet new people, and that's pretty challenging for an introverted person. But that's sort of all I could come up with, because I just thought the challenges are actually the good experiences.
You've done the soul searching and found the silver linings. So they're not.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I think it's about, yes, we do have to call certain things challenges. We need names so that we can address things. But that's also where you find the gold.
Oh, I love that. I'm totally on board with that. And reframing is so important. I love the take on that, especially when you are working with children and influencing them. When you think about the responsibility, it's just it's a lot, but it's such a privilege to be around children and be there for them and support them through those moments that they do find maybe initially difficult, but then when they've come up with a solution or a strategy, it becomes fun, and it's exciting because it makes you look back on the things that sometimes. Do you find that you remember feeling that way when you were little or when you were younger? I might never be able to do that thing.
Yes.
And knowing what you know from your experience and then coming at it with a fresh perspective, it's now saying, well, let's learn together, or let's do this together. Let's see what we can come up with. It's really refreshing.
Yeah. And I think it's that whole journey of understanding that you can survive things that don't necessarily feel great.
Oh, yes.
And proving that to yourself. And this is where children have yet to do that. So they need that support to do that. But once you can prove that to yourself, for most of our challenges, we know that there's some way around it. And I think you need to prove that. And you can only prove that by actually having something a little bit tricky. If everything's easy and clean for you the whole time and people just support you and helicopter you, or whatever the term happens to be for parenting at the moment, then if you don't feel that little bit of discomfort, you can't really grow in that situation, I don't think. So I think it's really important and makes you strong. For these things like COVID, there will be now a generation of children that have experienced some discomfort, where they couldn't automatically go out to the park, couldn't automatically go to a friend's, perhaps missed a birthday party of somebody special. And that would have felt yuck, but then they would have lived through that and realised that, and that would be adding to the accumulation of the various experiences that they've now gotten through, and they're fine, they're still okay. And I think that's the message, that they can come out on the other side and they'll be okay, and that makes them then stronger.
I think when you say that, it has to naturally filter through to the people that are around them. I know people have asked me who are not in it specifically in education, but they have asked me during our lockdown, how are the children coping? And in a lot of ways, I'd say better than the adults. And I think as adults, sometimes there's been a small period of time where you're thinking, oh, for the children, they've missed out. But actually, they don't see it that way. And you kind of have to pull back to yourself and say, well, hang on, what part of that is me, and imagining myself as a child in this time, and what is actually me and leading the way. So really interesting. And also, I was mentioned to you before we started the call that my niece is about to start her career. She's almost ready to complete her final teaching rounds. And, you know, she's coming into a really interesting time where she'll be seeking employment next year. I'm wondering what it's going to be like for our teachers starting their careers next year, having gone through these experiences where a lot of them couldn't actually get placements until much later in the year. Normally this part would already be taken care of, but they've had to think on their feet and adapt and pivot, as we consistently hear that word pivot. I wonder what sort of support you think existing teachers or new teachers might need as we sort of come to a new phase of teaching. Have you got any thoughts on that?
As I say to my TAFE students or higher ed students, that I think it's really important that the connections they make through their studies, at least initially, they're very careful to hang on to and have a bit of a network of support, even just to ring up and say, oh, this happened today with a child, I didn't know what to do, what would you have done? Or a parent or the environment, or whatever it happens to be, having somebody to just understand is going to be really valuable for them. Because yes, the more experienced teachers have been through COVID as well, but they had other coping skills and they weren't, and they've already got their network as well. So within their schools or kinders or wherever they're working, they have a staff group that I think I've experienced in the last few months have become closer as a consequence of having to solve problem after problem after problem and go into school, out of school, online, offline, all that sort of thing. I think staff groups within schools have become stronger, so that's fantastic. Hopefully a lot of them will also think, well, here's the person who's just coming in, how can I give them the support that they might have missed out on? Perhaps they had to have a shorter placement or more intensively, so they didn't get to practice over that length of time or something. We had the same thing here. A lot of our students had to hold off placement, still doing placement in this last few weeks, right before they finish, which is, it's tough because you're doing so much theory without practicing it.
Yeah.
And they wonder how they will go. Most will be fine, but there's always the risk that in practice, some of them have even said to me, what if I don't like it? Because they've not actually been with a group of 4 or 5-year-olds for a whole day.
Wow. The big question, isn't it?
Yeah. So they think that they'll be fine, but they don't know.
I think that's really healthy to be asking it now. It just shows a lot of maturity and soul searching now to be considering. It's maybe something that you might have thought, if it was, without, in a world without COVID, you may have had a few reservations and nerves, but this is a real a new thing, and it sounds like sounds really emotionally healthy, I think, because that's, I don't know if you agree, Liz, but when you start your career at any point or even through your career, it's just really important to have people around you that understand. Like you said, being able to ring someone and say, I had a terrible day. I just need another person who understands what I do. And it's not a job. It's I call it a vocation. It doesn't finish at 3 o'clock like some people might believe. But who do you go to for support?
Generally colleagues, some ex-colleagues, because there was a depth of understanding there that's been there for years. So because I'm recently moved here, I'm still building up those networks, and I've yet to go into any kind of permanent teaching role and be part of a staff team. Although I've been fortunate to be in some good primary schools where they've been really inclusive of relief teachers as well, which is great. But you don't get the same, you don't get the meetings, and you don't get all those sort of add-on times, which, although some teachers see as really invasive on their private time, I think they're really important for that support and that motivation to be a happy teacher, remain a happy teacher.
Yeah.
Isolating yourself.
Absolutely. Where would we be without our teaching colleagues? And we haven't actually connected in a while, but I think when you have a rapport with someone and when you've worked with someone before, I guess there's that shared experience that you'll always have, and you can look back on it probably laughing most of the time about some of the things that were said and done that might have felt stressful at the time. But, as you were saying before, there's all the growth that comes from those perceived challenges as well. Yeah.
We're lucky here because myself and another colleague that I work with closely in the Ed Support Department, we do loads of work. The poor students get a bit bombarded with a whole lot of growth mindset and mindfulness. And I think that's why they're asking the questions ahead of even going out. Will I like this? So we've got this whole reflective community thing going, which is great. And it's great that everybody's accepting of it. So there's no right or wrong. It's how you're feeling, and let's support each other, whatever that happens to be.
Oh, that's wonderful. So do you practice mindfulness yourself, or?
I live for mindfulness.
I thought it was fairly obvious. I was expecting a yes, but I thought I would still ask the question directly.
I do. Very easy to do in that background as well.
Yeah, every day is paradise in Coffs Harbour.
Climb up that palm tree. I do a lot of that myself, and I found it to be incredibly helpful in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference because there is quite a high level of stress in education because, generally speaking, we're caring people. Yes. And if you're a good teacher, you're very connected to your students. You want the best for them. If you've done your research, this is pretty much their one go at education. We don't get to go back and do it again. So it's really important how we form those little brains, and it's a gift we get to give to them, but it means we have to look after ourselves, because if we give too much away, we've got nothing left.
Yes, it's a little dance, isn't it? A lot of yourself, but not all of it.
Oh, that's the perfect thing that you just said, Jo, because if you do a dance with them, everybody wins. You know, literally, if you're dancing, everybody's getting their little stress release, their connectedness. You're thinking like that is what will save us, if we can just dance together.
Remember that. I just occurred to me, I was thinking about the energy exchange. I also practice mindfulness. It's not something that I'm having a lot of conversations with colleagues right now about, but maybe not at that specific. But we do talk about one of the ways of being mindfulness of practicing concepts of mindfulness is even just to think about the time you're spending at work. I've got a little picture that I've put around the office and a few places in our preschool, and just asks things like, have I left work on time? Am I taking a break? Sometimes we used to laugh about, not even using the toilet because you're just so busy, or stopping to eat lunch. And then it suddenly becomes not so funny, because it's like, well, why would you do that? I mean, especially we're in the business of talking to children about their own regulation. We need to think about how we're modeling ourselves and the energy that we bring to a group, and how we respond to the things that come at us every day.
Yes.
Yeah. I've so enjoyed talking to you, but I've got one final question, because I could talk about growth mindset forever. And I wonder if you've got a great piece of advice. I'm sure you've had several, but is there something that has stayed with you through your career that you'd like to share with us today?
I think, in short, look for the wonderful in everything.
That's gorgeous.
But trust yourself. I think we all come out of Teachers College with a lot of theory, sometimes a lot of instruction on how to fix things, which makes us have a bit of a mindset of, well, this child perhaps has a learning challenge, or they're only eating white food, or they're not having a rest, or whatever it happens to be, and kind of understanding that they're all judgments. The child chooses to eat white food, and we think they should eat a variety of food at that point. That's our judgment. And I think what I'm trying to say is, let the children lead you in the planning. They will do the planning for you, which is
I agree.
a shortcut. If you are observant, let them do the planning, because if you're watching them and understanding them, connecting with them, then you'll know what their interests and skills, etc., are, and that's exactly what goes on the plan. And you work from there. So it's not about you having to sit down for hours every night and figure out what you think a child requires. They will let you know that, but you have to be open to that, and you have to not go, oh, at school I was told I had to do this, this and this. It's about, yes, you've got all that knowledge now, trust that theory, and make your judgments from what you see right in front of you, and your workload will be sliced. because like it makes such a huge difference to, certainly you can still guide them if you've got intentions, you want them to have a particular learning, you have intentions, you can guide them towards a particular direction. That's your job as well. But if they go another way, listen to that and use that to then set your intention from there on, so that you're always following the child's lead and following their interests, and it will be so much easier. That's beautiful. One. And be super flexible.
Yes. Because one of the many benefits of you being flexible is that you're also teaching flexibility to our next generations.
Yes.
If children can see that, they can be that. So yeah, I love that. Anything that's time saving, anything that's it's what you said before, coming back to that mindfulness and presence. The way to get there is not try so hard. Actually sitting there in front of you, but the key is to be observant. I love that. Look for the wonderful. That is just beautiful.
But I think, just like you say, if you're just aware and it is in front of you, usually, beautiful, quick little story of a group of preschoolers who were creating a boat of types out in the yard. So all kinds of, pieces of timber, leaves, boxes, whatever. They'd spent some time putting this boat together. There was a group of them working together, lots of great language happening and everything, collaboration going on. And they were ready to set off. So they all jumped in. And, they declared they were going to, I don't know where, land. I think that's really great because we're always going to I don't know where land as teachers as well. So they said that, and that got stuck in my brain. And then they're about to go off, and they carefully put it all together, started to move, and it just fell apart. Instantly, one of the students went, let's change to the underwater engines. And I thought, flexibility of thinking. And that's exactly how we have to be. Their whole boat had just collapsed. But that's okay, we're underwater now. We need the underwater engine. And I just thought, beautiful lesson for all of us from them. So, that flexibility, that just sense of humour, even though they'd worked so hard on it together, I think it's really important to remember that in your career, just a little bit of go with the flow is great.
Absolutely. Oh, it's just been lovely. I felt really transported to your group. I really could picture them when you were describing that. Oh, it's just so important. And I could go on about the value of play. You were referring to children in preschool, but I'm guessing that your experience with primary school is you encourage that magic to stay within the teaching, and it's pretty obvious that there'd be more directives about curriculum and what needs to be taught, but I imagine that you infuse that same philosophy, which is there's things to be taught, but there's still lots of room for children to lead you in the way they're going to learn best.
Oh, absolutely.
That content. Yeah.
You can't force interest.
No.
Doesn't matter how you dress up or flounce around or whatever. If it's not interesting and engaging for the students, I'm a little bit of the odd one out in primary schools. Often you'll find me with my class outside in the dirt with our books and our little whiteboards and whatever. We still do the curriculum, but the children enjoy it and we have a lovely day, and that's what I think really matters.
Yes.
Because then they're going to want to learn the next thing. So yes, we have plenty of fun.
Oh, so important. I'll start to wrap up, but the last thing, it just reminded me of something you said earlier. It was the influence of your teachers that shaped what kind of educator you would become. And I remember still being in grade 5 and grade 6, so 10, 11 years old, and we still loved being read to, and our teachers would do funny voices. And my favourite teacher ever, actually, I will never forget his genius way of teaching maths. He combined PE, so we'd do laps around our school oval. He said, I don't mind if you walk, crawl, roll around, run, whatever you want to do. Each person participated in their own way and contributed to the big goal. And he'd had this hand-drawn map of Melbourne to Sydney, and we converted the laps to kilometres, and then we travelled between Melbourne and Sydney and had little pit stops in the towns along the way. It was genius.
Excellent.
That boat.
Yes.
Oh, more of it, I say. But
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for a really fun and enjoyable conversation with you. And thank you so much. This has been really enjoyable.
Thank you for having me. Hope to see you again soon.
So, thanks, Liz.
All right. Bye for now.
All right.